everyone. Welcome back to the competition studio at the 2025 International Paderewski Piano Competition in Bydgoszcz. I am delighted today to welcome to the studio Professor Joanna MacGregor from the Royal Academy of Music in London. Joanna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Great to see you.
Thank you. I'd love to start by asking, since we're having this interview during the preliminary round of the competition, and you're so known as an innovator of recital programs, what makes for a so-called good recital program in a competition?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated thing because obviously for all candidates of a competition, they have to abide by whatever rules the competition has, and they all change quite a bit depending on the type of competition you're going in for. It could be Chopin, or it could be more mixed, or it could be a contemporary competition. So I always say to all the students I look after here, because obviously I'm the head of piano here, so I have to look after 100 or more students at the Academy, just make sure you have masses of repertoire to choose from. I think, I know young pianists can fall into this trap. They play the same repertoire year in, year out, and so that they feel safe when they're in a competition. However, my experience of sitting on a jury is that we can tell if people are bored with what they're playing. And so you have to maintain an element of freshness somehow with the choice of your repertoire so that it's exciting for you, you know, because all competitions are performance opportunities. Even the first round of a competition, it's a chance to play to people. So you must just play things that you're passionate about, that you know well, but you're not yet stale playing.
Yes.
I'm keenly aware of people who have their competition repertoire and they sort of take their competition repertoire around the world. However, those are the people who do look a little bit disconnected sometimes with what they're playing.
So interesting, we're kind of circling around a point here. One of the faux pas of preparing for a competition would be to make the mistake that simply because you've played it 15 times already, the 16th at the next competition is going to go well.
I think that's right. I think that's like real life. I mean, we all learn pieces, we play them, we perform them, we try and dig deep into the piece, and then we play. Because we know that as far as we are concerned, that's as far as we can get at the moment with that piece. I think what happens very much is our subconscious continues to work on the piece, even if we're not playing or practicing it. It's an amazing thing. We come back to a piece maybe 2 or 3 years later, and the piece has bedded down more in your soul. So I think that idea, if I just keep on nagging away at the piece and I keep on practicing it, that somehow it will improve it, unfortunately, is more subtle than that.
That's a very good way to put it, actually. When you hear someone who's played something and you feel they're probably getting a little bored of it, what are some of the signs that you're picking up on in their playing that give you that, lead you to that conclusion?
Well, obviously a lack of spontaneity. I know it's very difficult when you're young because we have performance anxiety and we're hoping to please people enough. But the point is about being a performer is that your relationship with the piece is spontaneous and full of alertness. And I think you can tell if somebody is technically very secure, but they've slightly switched off musically with something. And you never want to get to that. You don't even want to get to that stage when you're practicing on your own. You're playing in front of people. And we all know that feeling. We've all had that feeling of feeling a bit bored and fed up when we practice with a piece. It's a sign to stop practicing the piece.
I was just going to ask you, okay, so we know you're the head of piano at the Royal Academy, the Dame Myra Hess Chair, and you are dealing with a lot of people that are coming into the Academy with the wish to go to competitions and make careers. So one of the things we have to do, of course, is over-prepare technically so that under pressure, things really come out. What kind of advice do you give to your students to make sure that they can maintain this freshness and spontaneity alongside the technical standards of the profession?
I think never, ever practice just one recital program. Never, ever do that. In the world of professional pianism and being a professional musician, you're going to be playing many different recital programs in 1 year. You're going to be playing several concertos. You're going to be playing chamber music. If you think of what a string player does, very often a principal leader, say, of an orchestra, they're playing different repertoire every night, and they learn to have this incredible ability to absorb. Now, solo pianists are somewhat different because they do have to get up there, often play an hour from memory or something like that. But even so, I'm a great believer in certain pieces feed other pieces. So if I sing a Brahms sonata, it's being fed by a rather more modern piece of music I might be practicing at the same time. Or if I'm practicing Bach, that is going to feed my practice of Prokofiev, say. So never get stuck on one composer or one thing. It's all connected. I mean, the musicianship, the technique, the history, we're all on a continuum of in music. So try if you can to hold more than one competition program in your head. I mean, certainly competitions ask you to do that anyway.
It's a requirement.
You arrive with a vast amount sometimes.
Yeah.
But try and mix it up a little bit. At least competitions very often ask you for different things. They ask for different 20th century pieces, different works. The concerto lists are not the same. So it forces you, doesn't it, to try different things.
Something I wanted to follow up that you said about how Bach would feed Prokofiev, for example. Now, I've noticed in some competitions the relative level of avoidance of Bach pieces, particularly those with fugues, but a high level of interest in the transcriptions, let's say by Busoni. What do you think about that?
Well, I love Bach Busoni transcriptions. You know, I think they're great. I sympathize with people avoiding fugues because obviously a fugue is a frightening thing if you're feeling nervous. But I always encourage people to think, because usually it's a Baroque category, and what I find very underplayed in competitions is French keyboard repertoire, which is just glorious to play. It's characterful, effervescent, very often highly virtuosic. I really sort of encourage people, if you have something to fulfill in the Baroque era, take a look at Rameau and Couperin and these sensational composers. The other person I always think is overlooked is C.P.E. Bach.
True.
A magnificent writer for keyboard, and incredibly virtuosic as well.
One of the things I wanted to ask you as well on this note, people tend to fulfill Baroque requirements with works that are really, really challenging. What is the main challenge of a fugue in a competition setting that might be different, let's say, from a degree recital?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've touched on nerves, and nerves can, you know, not be your friend with a fugue. But I think playing fugues is a wonderful thing. Wonderful if you're, in fact, just this morning I was teaching the D-sharp minor fugue from book 1. I mean, you know, hardly gets better than that, really, that piece. And I think actually if you could give a quality of characterization, there's almost nothing wrong you can do with a fugue. You just need to have a character, decide what the character is. And we know from all the recordings that there are out there, historic recordings and more modern ones, it's up to you what the character of this fugue is. And you just want to, in a way, show your individuality with it and your persistence with, this is the character of the fugue and this is how I'm going to allow it to unfold. And very often these fugues are dances. They're not all very serious and cathedral-like. You know, they're quite fizzy and fun to play. But like I say, I think it's difficult if you get a competition.
It is. And another thing that interested me when I was reading your biography is how much you spend time encouraging students to be creative with their careers as much as possible. So a programming question I wanted to ask your opinion on. When a program at a competition very closely resembles the representative works of a jury or an examination at a school, do you find those kinds of programs disengaging?
No, because I mean, you know, in this place, at least at the Academy, our programming is fairly open. We ask people to jump through hoops in the undergraduate years. So of course, everybody will be doing a Mozart concerto exam here. And obviously playing Beethoven, Schumann, all the things you'd expect, you know, the mainstream. It's as you get older, you want to start making more artistic and more individual choices about repertoire. And I think that you can show that even in a competition where there are certain requirements to fulfill, like a Beethoven sonata, for example, but you can still show the artist that you are. And I think juries really perk up quite a bit if they come across a candidate who's not only fulfilled the requirements, but actually brought something a bit special with them that everybody else is playing, and or something clever, you know, some clever choice. A study, for example, supposing, you know, they want you to play a study, but they're not telling you which one. Well, there's the Marc-Andre Hamelin studies, which are really,
We just heard one this morning. Yeah.
really terrific.
Yes.
You know, that's a terrific choice. You know, there, in fact, loads of really exciting composers have written studies, as you know. So that's a way to show your individuality and your daring as well. Because I mean, to be a pianist is to be daring.
That's
and,
true.
Well as artistic, courageous.
We've mentioned several things and touched upon them, but I wanted to ask this question very directly because we're in a competition. When you're judging a competition, what are some of the first few things that strike you in a pianist and you think, I really like this performance?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I mean, many things. I think looking at ease at the piano, looking like you're comfortable playing, looking like you are in love with the music that you're playing. I mean, you know, you have a deep love and respect for the composer. Personally, I find it a bit of a turn off if people just play fast and loud. I think, you know, fast and loud is fine, but, you know, we're very lucky with the pieces we play. They're very profound as well. So something shows a lot of thought to go into the musicianship, the quality of sound, of course, the sound that you make, depth and the richness, the ability to play pianissimo and let it reach the back of the hall. Those types of things I think are very interesting, and a proper intellectual engagement with whatever you're playing.
When you are absorbing, let's say, a piece you've played many times, and now you're hearing a totally new performance, have there ever been any experiences at competitions where you're totally bowled over by what someone's doing because it's so different from what you've done with that piece?
Yes, absolutely, of course. I don't have one interpretation in my head of anything. I mean, I'm thrilled when somebody comes on and does something entirely different and new. I absolutely don't have a sense of this is the only way you can play this piece. I do have a sense of if you're playing a Beethoven sonata, whatever you do, know those dynamics inside out. Because, you know, it is like a legal document, Beethoven sonata. You've really got to absorb everything that is written down, hairpins as well as the sforzandos and everything. I mean, you have to learn them at the same time as you learn the notes. They're not an added option.
Yes, I often find when pianists come in for lessons and they say, I was learning the notes for the first month and now we can go to the next step and add all the dynamics and the phrasing. It just doesn't work.
It really doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work with any composer. It definitely doesn't work with Beethoven. You learn all that straight away, and it's not a sort of sauce on the side. It's sort of, which sauce should I pour? I'll do a bit of sforzando today. No, it's kind of, and it's a physical thing. You have to sort of ingest it.
It's true.
Don't you, those dynamics? And I think that's really tough. And what I've noticed with young pianists is that they try to smooth out Beethoven's markings. You know, try and make it a little bit more palatable somehow, or less shocking. And of course, we can't hide from what he wants and the shocking nature of some of what is written. Similarly, long pedals. You know, sometimes Beethoven writes incredibly long pedals that we can't just lift the pedal because we think it sounds a bit weird. You know, I mean, we have to act like composers. You know.
And by the same token, I have heard in competitions sometimes performances of Mozart or Schubert where they sound a little bit too much like Beethoven. Like there needs to be something added to it to give this orchestral oomph to an otherwise very lyrical composer. Speaking of Mozart, you're performing all the Mozart concertos presently. Is that right?
Well, I have done, yes, in the past. I've played them all, yes, and I do actually. I've got a performance of because one of the things I've run an orchestra, so I've got a performance. Mozart D minor coming up early next year.
This is what I wanted to pivot to.
I'm playing Mozart.
In the Paderewski, in the semifinals, there's a recital with a commissioned piece that I want to ask you about commissioning in modern music, but there's at the second part of the semifinal is a Mozart concerto with a chamber orchestra. So off the top of your head, what are some of the differences between playing Mozart with a chamber orchestra versus with a symphony orchestra?
Oh, well, it's always better with a chamber orchestra. And it's even better if you can direct it from the keyboard, which I'm making the assumption you're not asking the soloist to do,
no, they're not meant to do this.
Collaborate. But I think I think possibly Mozart piano concerto is some of the greatest pieces you could ever hope to play as a pianist, and you are chamber music on a huge scale, so my tips for the pianist is to collaborate, you know, look at the leader, look at the principal cello, look across to the basses, know those woodwind parts inside out, because very often woodwind is incredible, brings all the color. Be prepared to have a dialogue with the... I recently heard a very good performance of a Mozart concerto in a competition, which was terribly well played, but no one could really hear it. It was too small. And you've got to sort of learn somehow to ride the orchestral sound at the same time as being a chamber pianist, which is a hard combination, actually. So you have to sort of rise up and be that soloist at the same time as being very inside the texture and understanding when you're accompanying them. And then you come out and you're the soloist, and then you go back into accompanying. It's a really wonderful thing to do. But for goodness sake, the best thing you can do with any concerto is to know the orchestral score inside.
Yes. What do you say to your students who tell you, I've been studying this from the two-piano score, but I haven't looked at the orchestral score?
Yeah, they have to. They just have to take a look at that orchestral score, write in the cues in your piano part, know what those cues are, know that you're playing against strings or woodwind, because it entirely defines the touch that you're going to have. It changes things, you know. Mozart knew all this because it was his piece. He barely bothered to write down the piano part half the time, but he knew those woodwind and string parts, so it would have defined his own phrasing to a degree. And that kind of thing, I think that type of thing we have to study a little bit more now. Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And also, don't be frightened to play your own cadenza if you've chosen a concerto that doesn't have a Mozart cadenza, because with our Mozart exam here, which we do for the third-year undergraduates, we have a prize for the best original cadenza.
Really?
And I find that a lot of the students bring their own cadenzas, and they're absolutely fantastic, you know, and some of them are in the style of Mozart, and some of them are extremely modern. It can be in any style, as long as they're related to the concerto, you know.
That's fantastic. I wish more would do that in competitions in general, because it is so fascinating to hear improvisation alongside texts that we know and are really familiar with.
Absolutely. And also, you don't have to improvise your cadenza. You can compose it, because I've done that. You know, I have improvised cadenzas, and then I've realized the conductor has a nervous breakdown because you don't know when you're coming to the end.
Yes.
But you can certainly write your own cadenza. I think it's a thrilling thing to do that, and very much in keeping with the style of what you're playing.
You've been talking about conducting, and you conduct an orchestra, and I'd like you to, if you want to, share a little bit about your first experience conducting an orchestra. We're so insular pianists, right? And then at some point, I mean, what brought you to want to do this?
It was such a long time ago. I first started conducting. I first started conducting about 25 or 30 years ago. Okay. And it was an accident, actually. It was because I was working with a chamber orchestra that didn't have a conductor. I was doing a couple of concertos with them, and they said, well, obviously we don't have a conductor. Will you direct it from a keyboard? And I said, yeah, sure. Okay, fine. And I think one of these concertos was Mozart. The other was Schnittke concerto.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so you don't have to just direct 18th century pieces. There are loads of sort of quite modern pieces you can learn to direct from keyboard. That's a very good way to get into conducting, because you're half conducting, you know. And actually, you're still at the keyboard. I mean, the oddest thing for me was the first time I stood up and conducted without playing the piano, and that was very strange, because I'm an instrumentalist, and obviously you kind of feel at your most vulnerable if you're not with your instrument. But anyway, there you are. All later, I am conducting the Rite of Spring and all that kind of thing. Obviously, no piano involved. So,
did that change you as a pedagogue after you have a lot of experience of conducting, and then you listen to, let's say, a piano soloist playing solo repertoire, and their sense of rhythm or their sense of timing?
Well, I think the interesting thing about orchestral instruments is they all take longer to make the sound. The exception of percussionists. Everybody else takes a while to get the sound out of their instrument. And this is one of the horrifying things you discover when you're a young pianist and you first start playing concertos. You constantly feel ahead of the orchestra. And there's a really simple reason for that. The piano sound is instant. And so the way you react to it is instant. And then everybody else is putting a bow on or blowing through an instrument or something. And then you learn to start breathing in the same way. Well, you have to learn how to do that. And I think that alone, just that experience of working with other instrumentalists, teach you a lot about the orchestra and how that works. It's very common that pianists just put their heads down and play. And what you have to do is breathe along with the orchestra, just allow that sense. And also the geography of an orchestra is very different, isn't it? You know, you've lots of people who sit a long way from the front of the stage, and that obviously makes a difference to phrasing and how an orchestra works as a body. And the poor old pianist, if you get back to a concerto, there you are at the front, you practice your part. You know, I learned this in a very visceral way the first time I played the Grieg piano concerto.
What happened?
I counted the 4 beats and timpani roll. I played my A minor chord, and then the orchestra played, because they were all going, you know, they took a moment to play.
Right.
And from that moment on, I realized that probably those types of moments, you have to be with, you know, you go with them. These kind of tiny things you learn. So when you're learning your concerto and you're practicing it with a second pianist, ask them to behave more like an orchestra. Don't say to them, can you accompany me? You know, no. You say, can you behave like an orchestra, which is that they're big, they take time, they breathe, you know.
One of my teachers did this with me when we were working on Tchaikovsky, and he would play woodwind parts about a beat later than I was expecting them. And I would complain, what are you doing? And he said, I'm preparing you.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
It changes your ears and your perception of sound.
Absolutely right, because otherwise you're going to be shocked when you do your rehearsal. You know?
On a similar vein, one of my teachers who also did this same thing would ask me, do you expect that your first performance is going to be with the Chicago Symphony or the New York Philharmonic? And that leads me to my next question, which I think is really important for young pianists. They come to competitions like this one, of course, with the desire to get to the semifinal, final, and work with a great orchestra. But what's the value in preparing for competitions by working with any orchestra you can get your hands on?
I think that's great. And obviously, we listen to recordings of great pianists playing with the Berlin Philharmonic or Chicago or something. And we forget that, you know, I say to them, you forget that these recordings are made by people who have played this concerto perhaps for 20 years before they actually recorded it. And they're working with Fritz Reiner, or they're working with, you know, the greatest conductors you can think of. So obviously your experience is different. You're very young, you're maybe playing this for the first time. But I think certainly trying to play with amateur orchestras, although it can almost be off-putting because it's so different from listening to the Berlin Philharmonic, it really teaches you a lot about the passage work, what's difficult, what's difficult for an orchestra, what's difficult for the conductor. You know, you need to know this. You need to know this is a difficult passage. Sometimes pianists don't understand. They just think, I must play fast and loud here. But actually, what the woodwind are doing is incredibly intricate, and you need to give them time to do that. So I think anybody, and certainly even sometimes these chamber reductions of concertos can be fun as well, because it teaches you about reading. There's a rather nice arrangement, isn't there, of even Beethoven 4 with string quartet, which obviously isn't going to give you the breadth of the sound of a full orchestra, but it will certainly tell you about shaping and phrasing and the length of phrasing.
What I find with those, because I've done Beethoven second with full orchestra and chamber orchestra, the smaller orchestra, you hear the intricacies of the lines much more. There's a greater interactivity there. And when you were mentioning earlier about the eye contact and knowing where certain instruments are, if there's only one instrument with the part, you're staring right at them when they're entering, right? And when you're cueing them, they're cueing you.
I think that interactive thing with between soloist and orchestra is really vital. To say hello to the leader of the orchestra straight away. The leader of the orchestra is absolutely your friend, along with the conductor. You need to have relations there. They're sitting right on your left-hand side when you play a concerto. Look across to the cellos and basses, because very often your left hand needs to align with where they are. And it's the easiest way to make sure your ensemble is terribly good, you know, because you can physically see when they're about to do a pizzicato plucking, or they, you know, I mean, just know that there are people all over the orchestra who are reflecting your lines. And if you can just pinpoint that at the right time, you're going to have great ensemble and a great sense of working together all the time.
I love the feeling when the left hand aligns perfectly in a Rachmaninoff concerto, for example, with what the basses are doing. That makes such a difference to the main lines.
Yes, you're talking about the very opening of Rec 2, aren't you? When you're most nervous. You played your chords, and then boom, we're off.
And you just know at the end they're going to be complaining that you weren't listening to a single downbeat that they had to find if you don't know how to make the septuplets.
Work with the pizzicato. I mean, obviously the tune is the tune, you're accompanying the tune, but you're actually with this very heavy bass. It's fab. And it will calm you down.
I'm so glad you're pointing that out because I go blue in the face telling students that, and I'm sure there are many piano teachers all around the world right now who are saying yes to what we're talking about. Another fascinating component in your career is the number of commissions that you've done. And at the Paderewski, they have to play the semifinalists a commissioned piece that they've never heard before. First of all, how do you end up with over 100 premieres and commissions of new pieces? That's incredible.
Started really young, I think my first commission, I was about 16, I honestly, I was so interested. It was partly because I like composing myself and, I'm really into writing music. And so I have this aptitude or endless empathy with composers. And obviously as a very young artist, all through my 20s, that was one of my USPs. I would play the Grieg piano concerto or Rack 2 or Beethoven or everything else, but I was always working with composers. And, I was taught by a composer at Cambridge University who then years later wrote me a concerto that I played at the proms. And so this idea of that being a specialism, I don't think it's right. If you look at Rubinstein's amazing career, he was always premiering pieces.
Yeah, he was very close with Szymanowski, for example.
Yeah, Szymanowski, Bell, Stravinsky, masses of stuff that he premiered that we forget about,
It's true.
And
who wrote you a concerto? Which concerto is that?
Oh, well, I've played quite a few new concertos, but that particular one I'm talking about was by Hugh Wood, who was my composition teacher. And he was known as a great serialist, but in fact, he ended up writing a concerto. He was in his 70s by then. He wrote something rather romantic, I thought, and rather jazzy for me. And it was a huge hit at the proms. It was massive. And we recorded it a year later, but this is with the BBC Symphony Orchestra and Andrew Davis, and then revived it several times. I mean, that's just an example that, if with composers, sometimes they turn out to be terribly famous years later. And there you are, you premiered stuff of theirs. But I think all young people should want to engage with living composers. It's great.
What do they have to miss out on if they don't? If they only focus on solo and they never try even to branch out and meet with composers, what are they missing out on?
Well, for a start, audiences want it.
Great answer.
I mean, we live in a plural society now where the classical music audiences are expectant of 20th and 21st century music. They don't come anymore just to listen to Schubert. They want to listen to your Schubert connected with a 20th or 21st century composer, and they're interested in those connections you've made. So that's immediately what you've got to get with the program, folks. And festivals as well. If you speak to a festival director or somebody who runs a piano series, they're going to say to you as a youngster, well, this is fantastic. You want to come and play Ravel, Tombeau de Couperin. This is marvelous. It's been his 150th anniversary all year. That's great. But what else are you going to play with it?
Always.
And if you can get in the habit of having your list of interesting or exciting or slightly more new pieces, or even better, get somebody to write something for you. Or even better still, write something for yourself, because there's a great history of pianists as composers. Or, composers who started off as pianists.
That must be intriguing. At Paderewski, there have been a couple of situations where people played their own pieces at the competition. And the jury was always very interested to see the score, etc. So if you're at a competition and you see someone's playing their own piece, how do you react to that program even before you hear it, when you know it's coming?
I'm absolutely delighted at the festival, because I just think that is part of being a pianist. Actually, there's a great history of pianists playing their own music and writing their own music and improvising their own music. I mean, that is to be a pianist. We all play Busoni, so come on, that is the essence of Busoni. Someone great pianist who is an enormous influence, transcribed things. If you don't want to write your own piece, just transcribe something. Do what Tony did, take something you're interested in and make it a piano piece that you can play. And I honestly think that brings your artistry really beautifully towards an audience.
That's fantastic. You know, what I'm really hearing is that you're connecting what they're doing at a competition with the real world. You're not just seeing it as a microcosmic event, but something bigger.
Yes, absolutely. I think the best way to approach a competition if you're a young artist is to see it as a great opportunity to enhance your artistry, your repertoire, to practice performing in front of people, to make connections. If you're lucky, let's just say you may reach the final, that's wonderful. You know, you may get to the final, that's great. But any stage of any competition is a chance for you to practice being an artist in public. And that's the best way to view them, actually.
Yes, those are really wise words. In fact, on that note, I feel like that's the perfect way to finish our interview today. And I really want to thank you, Joanna MacGregor, for your time. It's been wonderful to speak with you, and we look forward to hearing more of your artistic work in the future.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We'll see you tomorrow for our next episode of the Competition Studio.
The 13th International Paderewski Piano Competition in Bydgoszcz, Poland. November 9th to 23rd. Watch live broadcasts online. More information at paderewskicompetition.pl and on social media.
Hello, you're so pretty, you're giving me vertigo. You're like the sun in the sky, every day you're glowing. What's your secret, oh baby, I wanna know.
Bydgoszcz. Jedno miasto, dwie rzeki, tysiące historii.
Energia jutra zaczyna się w umysłach, które sięgają dalej. Energia jutra to bezpieczeństwo, rozwój, niezależność, wielkie inwestycje dla pewnej przyszłości. ORLEN to więcej niż przystanek na drodze. To droga. Energia jutra zaczyna się dziś.
Stadiony, baseny, muzea, opery, te i wiele innych obiektów powstało ze środków przekazanych przez Totalizator Sportowy. Od 1994 roku przekazaliśmy na te cele ponad 22 miliardy złotych. Totalizator Sportowy, właściciel marki Lotto.
The 13th International Paderewski Piano Competition in Bydgoszcz, Poland. November 9th to 23rd. Watch live broadcasts online. More information at paderewskicompetition.pl and on social media.
Cukiernia Sowa życzy Wam słodkiego dnia. Codziennie.
13. Międzynarodowy Konkurs Pianistyczny imienia Ignacego Jana Paderewskiego w Bydgoszczy.